On our 10th wedding anniversary, I arrived home 3 hours early to prepare a surprise for Su Qing. On the dining table sat the beef Wellington I had made myself, the decanted 82 Lafite, and the tulips flown in from the Netherlands just this morning. I even put on the suit I wore at our wedding 10 years ago. Although it was a bit tight, the atmosphere was what mattered most. However, what I waited for was not Su Qing's hug and kiss, but a cold contract and a photo of a young man. Lin Zhou, let's talk. Su Qing took off her trench coat, revealing the well-tailored Chanel suit underneath. She was as meticulous as ever, like a queen preparing for battle. The fire in my heart was instantly half doused, but I still smiled and went to greet her. Talk about what? Let's eat first. The food is getting cold. Today is our 10th anniversary. Su Qing didn't spare a glance at the dining table. She walked straight to the sofa, sat down, and pushed the document and photo in front of me. Sign this. Her tone carried no emotion, just like issuing an order to a subordinate at her company. I picked up the document. The large words on the cover were glaring. Supplementary agreement on cooperative childbearing. My heart sank suddenly, a sense of foreboding enveloping my entire body. Opening the agreement, the clauses inside made me feel as though I had plunged into an ice cave. Partie A. Suin. Party B. Lin Zhou. To address the childbearing needs of Party A, Ms. Su Qing, and following friendly consultations between both parties, the following consensus is reached. Party A has the right to autonomously select a third party for artificial insemination or natural conception. Party B shall not interfere. After the child is born, the household registration shall be under the names of both parties, and Party B shall assume primary responsibility for raising the child. As compensation, Party A shall pay Party B a lump sum of 50 million renminbi and gift Party B a top-floor duplex unit at Guanlan International. 50 million? A top-floor duplex? It sounded like a heavenly gift, but to me, it was the most vicious humiliation. My fingers turned white as I gripped the paper, almost tearing this absurd agreement to shreds. My gaze fell on the photo beside it. A boy in his early 20s, sunny and handsome, wearing a basketball jersey, his whole body radiating the hormones of youth. His smile was brilliant, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. Who is this? My voice was as dry as if it had been rubbed with sandpaper. A junior at Jiangcheng Sports University, named Yang Fan. Height 1.88 meters, in perfect health, no family history of genetic diseases, IQ 140. He is the optimal choice selected by our company's legal department from hundreds of candidates. Su Qing introduced him calmly, as if discussing a piece of merchandise. My head buzzed, feeling as if it had been smashed by a heavy hammer. 10 years ago, when we got married, she was the one who proposed being child-free. She said she didn't like children and her career was on the rise, so she didn't want to be dragged down by a child. I loved her, so I respected all her decisions. For these 10 years, I gave up my flourishing legal career to return to the family and be the man behind her. I learned to cook and managed everything at home so she could fight in the business world without any distractions. Among our relatives and friends, who didn't envy her for having such a considerate husband, she also often bragged in front of friends, saying I was her strongest shield. But now, this woman to whom I had dedicated 10 years of my youth and heart was holding an agreement, telling me she wanted to have a child with another man. And he was the fucking optimal choice. I felt like a massive joke. Su Qing, what do you take me for? I stared dead at her, trying to find a trace of guilt or hesitation on her exquisite, perfect face, but I failed. Her eyes were as cold as a block of ice. Lin Zhou, I am notifying you, not discussing this with you. She leaned back on the sofa, arms crossed, her posture arrogant. We agreed to be child-free back then, but that was then, and this is now. I'm already 35. If I don't give birth now, I'll miss the prime childbearing age. I need an heir to inherit my business empire. An heir? So you could just find some random man. I roared, my chest heaving violently. Watch your words, Lin Zhou. Su Qing's brows furrowed slightly. This isn't a random man. This is a transaction, a necessary investment for the continuation of the family line. Yang Fan will get a sum of money enough for him and his family to live without worry for a lifetime, and I get a child that meets my requirements. This is very fair. Fair. I laughed out of anger. Then what about our marriage? What about our 10 years of feelings? In your eyes, is that just a transaction too? Love doesn't put food on the table, nor does it ensure the longevity of my company. Su Qing stood up, walked over to me, and looked down at me from above. I've already decided. If you sign, we remain husband and wife. You will still be Mr. Lin, the man of the house. When the child is born, he will call you dad. 50 million and the house. That is enough to compensate for your sense of injustice. Her words were like poison-dipped daggers, stabbing ruthlessly into my heart. Compensate? She thought money could make up for everything? Could it make up for the humiliation of being cuckolded? Could it make up for 10 years of wasted devotion? Looking at her face, so cold, so self-righteous, a chill shot from the soles of my feet straight to the top of my skull. I suddenly felt that the woman standing before me was a stranger. Or perhaps I had never truly known her at all. And if I don't sign? I asked, punctuating every word. Su Qing's gaze turned ice-cold in an instant, and her lips curled into a mocking sneer. Lin Zhou, don't be ungrateful. You eat my food, with the clothes I bought, drive my car, and live in my house. If you leave me, you'll have nothing. What gives you the right to refuse? A stay-at-home husband in his 30s who has been disconnected from society for 10 years. Do you really think you have any other choice? Her words cut straight to the bone. Have nothing. I repeated those two words in a low voice. The anger and disappointment churning within me suddenly, eerily, subsided. I looked up, meeting Su Qing's mocking, contemptuous gaze, and smiled. It wasn't a bitter smile, nor a miserable one, but a laugh from the heart, tinged with absurdity and relief. Su Qing, do you really think that if I leave you, I'll have nothing? My reaction clearly exceeded Su Qing's expectations. In her view, I should have been flying into a rage, or weeping and begging her to take back her ultimatum, not standing here terrifyingly calm. What are you laughing at? She frowned, a trace of displeasure and confusion flashing in her eyes. Did I say something wrong? Lin Zhou, I advise you to face reality. You've been a house husband for 10 years. You're completely disconnected from society. Without me, you won't even be able to find a decent job. Is that so? The smile on my face deepened. Perhaps. I didn't argue further. Instead, I turned and walked into the bedroom, pulling a suitcase out of the closet. I began to pack my things. My movements were unhurried as I folded my clothes one by one and placed them in the case. Toothbrush, towel, razor, just simple personal items. In this home, where I had lived for 10 years, the things that actually belonged to me were pitifully few. Su Qing followed me in, leaning against the doorframe, watching me coldly. What are you doing? Running away from home? Using this to threaten me? Her tone was dripping with disdain. Lin Zhou, can't you be a little mature? I don't have time to play house with you like a child. I ignored her and continued packing. I pulled open the bottom drawer of the bedside table and took out a worn-looking craft paper file folder. Seeing the file folder, Su Qing's gaze froze slightly. She seemed to remember something, but wasn't entirely sure. What is that? Just some waste paper, I replied faintly, carefully tucking the folder into the lining of the suitcase. 10 years. She had probably long forgotten what was inside this folder. She had also forgotten that the man standing beside her 10 years ago wasn't just a house husband who only knew how to revolve around a kitchen. Finished packing, I zipped up the suitcase and stood up. Su Qing, let's get a divorce. I said it with abnormal calm, as if saying, the weather is nice today. Su Qing was completely stunned. She had anticipated countless reactions from me, but divorce was the one thing she hadn't expected. In her eyes, I was a parasite completely dependent on her for survival. How did I dare, and how could I initiate a divorce? Divorce, she snorted, as if hearing the world's biggest joke. Lin Zhou, have you lost your mind? Do you know what divorce means for you? You leave with nothing. I know, I nodded, pulling my suitcase, ready to walk past her. My calm and resolve finally made Su Qing feel a trace of panic. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. You stand right there. Make yourself clear. Do you have someone else on the side? She demanded sharply, her eyes as keen as a hawk's. I stopped, looked back at her, and found it incredibly laughable. A woman preparing to have a child with another man was actually questioning her husband if he was cheating. What supreme irony. Su Qing, do you think a man who comes home on time every day to cook for you and keeps everything in your life organized has the time to find someone else? My counter-question left her speechless for a moment. It was true. For the past 10 years, my life had been reduced to a simple line between 2 points: home and the market. Almost my entire social life revolved around her circle. She controlled everything about me, confident that I could never escape the palm of her hand. Then have you lost your mind? Su Qing's tone was bordering on hysterical. Things were spiraling completely out of her control. She was used to being in charge, and my uncharacteristic behavior made her feel a loss of control she had never experienced before. I haven't lost my mind. I'm just tired. I gently shook off her hand, my gaze falling on the dining table behind her. The meticulously prepared candlelight dinner now looked like one giant, ironic joke. Su Qing, 10 years ago, for your sake, I gave up my career and abandoned my life plans. I convinced myself that loving you meant supporting you completely. I thought you would see my sacrifices and learn to cherish them. But in these 10 years, what have I been to you? A nanny? A pet? Or just a piece of old furniture you can throw away at will? Today, holding this agreement, you tell me you're going to have a child with someone else. Did you ever stop to think about how I feel? Is my dignity worth absolutely nothing in your eyes? My voice wasn't loud, but every word was like a nail driven into Su Qing's heart. Her face turned pale, shade by shade. I'm compensating you. 50 million. And a house. Most people never earn that much in a lifetime. She was still being stubborn, trying to measure everything with money. So in your eyes, my dignity is worth 50 million. I looked at her, my eyes filled with disappointment. Su Qing, you are too arrogant. You think money can buy everything, can measure everything. You think that because you control everything about me, I must wag my tail and beg for your pity. You're wrong. I grabbed my suitcase and walked toward the door without looking back. Lin Zhou, if you dare walk out that door, don't you ever think about coming back. Suin rode me. My hand rested on the doorknob, and I paused for a second. I didn't turn around, simply saying indifferently, Su Qing, you'll soon find out who it is that actually needs whom. With that, I opened the door and walked out. The door slammed shut behind me, cutting off her voice and cutting off 10 years of my youth and love. Stepping out of the elevator, the cold wind hit me, and I instantly sobered up. I took out my phone and dialed a number that had been gathering dust for a long time. The phone rang 3 times before it was picked up. Hello, who is this? A slightly raspy male voice came through. Old Zhao, it's me, Lin Zhou. There was silence on the other end for a full 10 seconds, followed by an exclamation of disbelief. Holy shit. Lin Zhou, you've been missing for 10 years, and you finally decided to call me? Cut the crap. I need you to handle something for me. My voice was completely steady. Zhao Delong, nicknamed Old Zhao, was on the other end. He was my best friend in college and my former law firm partner. 10 years ago, for Su Qing's sake, I withdrew my shares from the Dragon Boat law firm we founded together and turned my back on the professional world. Old Zhao was so furious back, then he almost cut ties with me, cursing me for ruining my future over a woman. Over these 10 years, we had barely been in contact. Well, did the sun rise in the west? The great lawyer Lin finally remembered his old friend? Spit it out. What could possibly make you, the house husband, come out hiding? Old Zhao's tone held a bit of teasing, but mostly concern. Draft a divorce agreement for me. Also, initiate Project Pangu. When I said the words Project Pangu, the line went dead silent again. This silence lasted even longer than before. So long that I thought the call had dropped. Lin Zhou, are you sure? Old Zhao's voice became incredibly serious, even trembling slightly. Do you realize what initiating Pangu means? That was what I know. I cut him off. Su Qing is going to have a child with someone else. She offered me 50 million as a breakup fee. I stated the most absurd thing in the world in the calmest tone possible. I could clearly hear Old Zhao suck in a sharp breath on the other end, followed immediately by a string of curses. What the FCK? Is that woman insane? Who the hell does she think you are? Old Zhao, calm down. I leaned against a stone lion at the entrance of the complex, looking up at the lit penthouse apartment in the distance, my home. I just want a divorce as soon as possible and to take back everything that belongs to me. Take back? It's going to be more than just taking it back. Old Zhao was even more furious than I was. Lin Zhou, you're a fucking idiot. Back then, for her sake, you transferred all the proceeds from Project Pangu into an offshore trust fund, and the beneficiary written was her name. You said this was a surprise for her. Now that surprise has turned into a shock, hasn't it? Project Pangu was an angel investment initiative that Old Zhao and I began conceptualizing back in college. Leveraging our legal expertise and keen market intuition, we invested in over a dozen startups before the corporate giants even took notice that would eventually become industry unicorns. These range from social networking apps to e-commerce platforms and from online education to new energy vehicles. When I retired 10 years ago, the assets under this plan had already reached an astronomical figure. I bundled all the shares and income rights under my name into a trust fund without telling Su Qing. I naively believed this would be the guarantee of our future happiness, an ace in the hole to support her when she needed it most. I even designated her as the ultimate beneficiary of the fund. As long as I didn't trigger it, the money would automatically transfer to her name only after my death or upon our 50th wedding anniversary. I thought this was romantic. Now, it seems like the greatest stupidity in the world. It's true that she's the beneficiary, but the power of activation and management lies in my hands, I said indifferently. Besides, there's a supplementary clause in the trust agreement. Have you forgotten? Old Zhao froze for a moment on the other end of the line before realizing what I meant. You mean the loyalty clause? Correct. When we first established the trust, Old Zhao vehemently opposed designating Su Qing as the sole beneficiary. He argued that human hearts are fickle and that the battlefield of love is no different from the battlefield of business. At his insistence, we included an extremely stringent loyalty clause. If the beneficiary, Su Qing, committed any act of infidelity during the marriage or voluntarily proposed any agreement violating the duty of marital loyalty, the settler, Lin Zhou, had the right to unilaterally modify or revoke the trust agreement. At the time, I laughed at Old Zhao for being overly suspicious, but I never expected his words to become a prophecy. Su Qing's supplementary agreement on cooperative procreation was the very sword she had personally handed to me, one that would sever all her delusions. Holy shit, Lin Zhou, did you calculate this moment 10 damn years ago? Old Zhao's voice was filled with shock and admiration. I just have a habit of always keeping a card up my sleeve. I looked up at that window. The light was still on. Su Qing was probably still waiting for me to return, wagging my tail and begging for mercy. Then I'll go take care of it right now. Damn it, I've been waiting 10 years for this day. I'm going to let that self-righteous woman know exactly what kind of man she gave up. Old Zhao seemed even more excited than I was. No, don't rush. I stopped him. It's not time yet. Why? Just throw the trust asset list in her face and scare the hell out of her. That would be letting her off too easily. A cold sneer curled the corners of my mouth. Doesn't she think I have nothing and can't survive without her? Doesn't she think 50 million is enough to buy out my dignity? I want her to see clearly, bit by bit, just how ridiculously wrong she is. I want her to pay the most agonizing price for her arrogance and ignorance. After hanging up, I didn't go to any hotel. Instead, I took a taxi to an old residential complex. It was an old apartment my parents had left me, which I had never sold. There was a thin layer of dust in the room, but I didn't care. From the hidden compartment of my suitcase, I pulled out a craft paper file folder. Inside wasn't waste paper, but the original copies of over a dozen stock certificates and investment agreements. These are my true trump cards. Su Qing, you think you've won? No, the game has only just begun. Early the next morning, my phone was bombarded with messages. There were texts from Su Qing, ranging from commands and threats at the start, to interrogation and confusion later on. Lin Zhou, what on earth are you trying to do? Get your ass back here immediately. Do you think running away from home solves anything? Childish. Have you lost your mind? Throwing away your home just out of spite. By the end, her tone had softened. All right, I admit I was a bit harsh yesterday. Come back first, and we can talk properly. We could discuss that agreement again. I looked at these messages and found them simply laughable. She still didn't understand where the problem lay. She thought this was just a typical marital spat, that I was throwing a tantrum, and that as long as she yielded slightly, I would obediently return. She didn't realize at all that she had crossed a man's bottom line. I didn't reply to a single one. I simply blocked her number. Then, I received a call from my mom. "Ajo, what happened between you and Xiao Qing?" She called me first thing in the morning, saying you two had a fight and you ran away from home. "You child, how can you be so immature? Xiao Qing is a woman out on her own. It's not easy for her to make her way in the world. You need to be more understanding of her." My mother is a typical traditional woman. In her eyes, Su Qing is a strong career woman and the pride of the entire family. I should support and tolerate her unconditionally. "Mom, stay out of my business with her." I interrupted her. "How can I not get involved? You need to go back and apologize to Xiao Qing immediately. Couples quarrel and then make up. There's nothing that can't be talked out." "Mom, she wants to have a child with someone else." My single sentence caused all of my mother's remaining arguments to catch in her throat. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before my mother's disbelieving voice came through. "What did you say?" I said. "Su Qing wants to spend money to find a 20-year-old male college student to help her have a baby." I repeated it calmly. That's impossible. Xiao Qing isn't that kind of person. There must be some misunderstanding." My mother obviously couldn't accept this fact. "There is no misunderstanding." She even showed me the agreement. I could imagine my mother's expression of shocked silence on the other end. I hung up the phone and turned it off. The world was instantly quiet. I spent the day cleaning the old house until it was spotless. In the evening, old Zhao drove over in his flashy red Porsche. As soon as he walked in, he gave me a bear hug. "You kid, you finally came to your senses." He looked at the refurbished room, then at me, and nodded. "Not bad. You look somewhat human again, not as wasted as I imagined." He took a stack of documents from his briefcase. "I drafted the divorce agreement you wanted. Regarding property division, I've tentatively written it as a 50-50 split of marital assets. However, that house at Guanlon International and those cars under your name are all registered under a company. They count as corporate assets, which is a bit tricky. This was exactly what I expected. Su Qing is an extremely shrewd person. She had long made foolproof preparations. Our nominal joint assets are pitifully few. Once we divorce, I will indeed be leaving with nothing. Those aren't important." I took the agreement and put it aside without even looking at it. "Not important?" Old Zhao's eyes widened. "These are assets worth over 100 million. Do you really plan to let that woman off easy?" I said, "I want to take back everything that belongs to me." I looked at him, my eyes calm and determined. "But not this way." "Then what do you plan to do?" Old Zhao looked confused. I smiled and poured him a cup of tea. "Do you remember that we used to invest in a restaurant chain brand called Shuaixuan?" Old Zhao thought for a moment. "I have a vague impression. It seems to be a place for high-end private cuisine. It developed quite well later and opened over a dozen branches." "What about it?" "Su Qing loves eating at their flagship store the most. She also likes to schedule business meetings there. She feels the environment and dishes there best suit her status as a domineering CEO. So, Old Zhao still didn't get it. "So I'm going to buy it." Old Zhao spat out his mouthful of tea. Buy it? Are you crazy? Shuaixuan's market value is at least 500 million now, and they're running perfectly fine. Why would they sell to you? A market value of 500 million doesn't mean the controlling rights cost 500 million, I said leisurely. I remember we invested in the angel round and held 30% of shares. Later, after several rounds of financing, our shares were diluted to about 12%. But this 12% is still the largest individual shareholding aside from the founder. The founder of Shuaixuan, Old Meng, seems to have run into some trouble recently. His son was gambling in Macau and owes 30 million in gambling debts. He's looking everywhere for money. Old Zhao was dumbfounded. How do you know all this?" "Being a house husband for 10 years, I had to find something to do," I said indifferently. Aside from grocery shopping and cooking every day, I spent the rest of my time researching these companies I used to invest in. Su Qing thought I was out of touch with society. What she didn't know was that I just changed my method and was controlling everything from behind the scenes. You kid are a real monster. Old Zhao looked at me, his eyes full of awe. So, you want to kick him while he's down and acquire Old Meng's shares? It's not kicking him while he's down. It's lending a helping hand. I corrected. I will acquire part of his shares at market price, or even slightly above market price. The condition is that he must give up the chairman's position and cooperate with me on one thing. What thing? Close down the Shuaixuan flagship store. The corners of my mouth curled into a cold arc. Su Qing, don't you enjoy looking down on everyone from your high horse? Then I will tear down your favorite stage. I'm going to make you realize that everything you take such pride in is, to me, nothing more than a toy I can crush at will. Su Qing had endured 2 incredibly irritable days. Lin Zhou had vanished. He wouldn't answer calls or return messages. It was as if he had evaporated from the face of the earth. She had gone to Lin Zhou's parents' home, only to be driven out by his mother's cold stare. She had asked around among their few mutual friends, but everyone claimed they knew nothing. This man, the man she believed she had in the palm of her hand, had broken free from her control for the first time. It filled her with an unprecedented irritability and a trace of unease. But who was she? She was Su Qing, the business queen who dominated Jiang City. She refused to believe that a man who had been out of touch with society for 10 years could cause any real trouble. She was convinced Lin Zhou was just acting out. Give it a few days, when the money in his pocket ran out and he tasted the bitterness of the real world, he would naturally come crawling back. She even indulged in a malicious thought. When that happened, she would have to properly educate this man who didn't know his place. So, she suppressed the annoyance in her heart and refocused her energy on her work and on her procreation plan. She arranged to meet Yang Fan at a high-end cafe. Yang Fan looked as sunny and cheerful as ever, dressed in a clean white t-shirt and jeans, radiating the aura of youth. President Su. Seeing Su Qing, he stood up somewhat awkwardly. Sit down. No need to be so formal. Su Qing smiled at him, trying to appear approachable. She sized up the boy before her. Young, healthy, smart, handsome. Whether in terms of genetics or appearance, he was impeccable. This should have been something that pleased her. Yet, for some reason, looking at Yang Fan's vibrant face, what surfaced in her mind was Lin Zhou's face, calm to the point of indifference. And those words he said when he left. You will soon find out exactly who cannot live without whom. A wave of inexplicable irritation surged in her heart once more. President Su, regarding the agreement. Yang Fan rubbed his hands nervously. My family has basically agreed. It's just that they hope. They hope the compensation amount could be a little higher. Oh, Su Qing raised an eyebrow. How much do you want? My mom asked if we could add another $1 million. Yang Fan's voice was barely audible, and his face flushed red. Su Qing smiled. As expected, in the face of money, everything had a price tag. This was exactly as she had predicted. Clean, efficient. Unlike Lin Zhou, who insisted on talking about feelings and dignity. No problem. She agreed without hesitation. $1 million is a small matter. As long as you cooperate, there will be plenty of benefits for you in the future. Thank you, President Su. Thank you, President Su. Yang Fan was overjoyed, thanking her repeatedly, watching his display of excessive gratitude. However, Su Qing felt an inexplicable emptiness. Suddenly, she found it all rather boring. Everything was going too smoothly, as smooth as a carefully choreographed play, and she was the play's only director and audience. Just then, her phone rang. It was her assistant. President Su, it's bad. Something has happened at Shuaixuan. The assistant's tone was extremely anxious. Shuaixuan? What happened? Su Qing's heart tightened. She had an appointment to treat an important client to dinner at the Shuaixuan flagship store that evening. They suddenly announced that the flagship store is suspending business for reorganization. It's closed indefinitely. What? Su Qing stood up abruptly, her voice rising sharply and startling Yang Fan across from her. How is that possible? I just had dinner with their boss, Old Meng, last week. Why didn't he mention this to me? I don't know, President Su. The news just came out, and the whole circle is exploding. I heard that Shuaixuan has a new majority shareholder, and the order came from them. A new shareholder? Who is it? Su Qing furrowed her brows tightly. Shuaishuan was her personal dining hall and a symbol of her status. Being able to host clients in the top-tier private rooms at Shuaishuan's flagship store was a mark of status in the Jiang City business world. Now, the place had closed without warning, and she, as their most important VIP client, hadn't received any advance notice. This was tantamount to a resounding slap across her face. Investigate. Investigate it immediately. I want to see just who is blind enough to mess with my turf. Su Qing roared into the phone. Hanging up, she had no desire to continue talking to Yang Fan. She waved a hand impatiently for him to leave, then immediately drove toward Shuaishuan. At the entrance of Shuaishuan's flagship store, a crowd of longtime patrons had already gathered, drawn by the news and buzzing with speculation. The heavy doors were shut tight, plastered with a conspicuous notice announcing the suspension of business. Su Qing stared at the notice, her face dark with suppressed rage. She took out her phone and dialed Old Meng, the founder of Shuaishuan, directly. The phone rang for a long time before it was finally answered. "Hello, President Su." Old Meng's voice sounded weary and helpless. "Old Meng, what's going on here? Why close so suddenly? Do you have any idea that I have clients scheduled for tonight?" Su Qing demanded, unleashing a barrage of questions. "President Su, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. My hands are tied." Old Meng sighed. "Shuaishuan, it's not up to me anymore." "What do you mean? Who is the new shareholder? Give me his number." On the other end of the line, Old Meng fell silent for a moment, then spoke in an incredibly strange tone. "President Su, this new shareholder. You know him?" "I know him." Su Qing froze. "Yes. He asked me to pass on a message to you." "What message?" "He said that tearing down a stage is easy. He wants you to pick the next one, so he can tear that down too." Old Meng hung up hurriedly as soon as he delivered the message, not giving Su Qing a chance to react. Su Qing stood frozen, gripping her phone, looking as if she had been struck by lightning. Tearing down a stage. Pick the next one. The phrase was so familiar. The image of Lin Zhou's cold face when he left instantly flashed through her mind. A thought so absurd she couldn't even believe it herself surged wildly in her heart. No, impossible. Absolutely impossible. He was a man who had been a house husband for 10 years. Where would he get the money to acquire Shuaishuan? Where would he get the nerve to provoke her in this manner? Su Qing immediately dialed her assistant, her voice trembling slightly with rage and shock. "Investigate him. At all costs. Find out exactly what Lin Zhou has been doing for the last 10 years. Check all his bank statements, all his social connections. I want to know everything about him." Su Qing's influence was immense. In less than half a day, a preliminary investigation report on Lin Zhou was placed on her desk. However, the contents of the report only left her more confused and furious. Lin Zhou, male, 38. No official employment record for the past 10 years. No real estate or vehicles under his name. Primary bank transactions consist of the monthly 200,000 yuan household allowance transferred by Ms. Su Qing. Spending records are concentrated in major supermarkets, vegetable markets, and household utility payments. Social circle is simple. Aside from relatives on both sides, there's only sporadic contact with a few college classmates, with no call records in the past 5 years. Sole suspicious point. Lin Zhou has a securities account registered 10 years ago, but there have been no transactions in the past decade, and the account balance is 0. The report's conclusion: Lin Zhou was a through-and-through freeloader living off his wife. Su Qing looked at the report, almost tempted to tear it to shreds. If Lin Zhou was really as clean as the report stated, then who on earth was the mysterious shareholder who acquired Shuaishuan? Was it just a coincidence? Was the provocative message just a misunderstanding involving someone with the same name? No, Su Qing didn't believe in coincidences. Her intuition told her that this matter was definitely related to Lin Zhou. He must have used some method she wasn't aware of. Useless. A bunch of useless idiots. Su Qing slammed the report onto the floor, roaring at her assistant over the phone. "You can't even figure out something this simple. What am I paying you for? Keep looking. Dig deeper. Even if he's hidden the money in a rat hole, dig it out for me." Hanging up, Su Qing paced irritably back and forth in her office. The news about Shuaishuan had already spread through their social circle. She had already received calls from several friends, ostensibly calling to show concern, but secretly, they were all laughing at her expense. "Oh my, President Sue, I heard your personal cafeteria closed down? This new shareholder really isn't giving you any face, is he? President Sue, did you offend some big shot?" These voices buzzed in her ears like flies, driving her to the brink of madness. She was Su Qing. She was used to walking through Jiangshang like she owned the place. When had she ever had to swallow such an insult? What made it even more suffocating was that she didn't even know who her opponent was. This feeling of punching cotton made her incredibly frustrated. Just then, her phone rang again. It was an unfamiliar number. She answered impatiently. "Who is it? May I ask if this is Ms. Su Qing?" "This is Asian Auction House." A polite female voice came from the other end of the line. "Asian Auction House?" Su Qing paused. "It was the top auction house in the country." "Yes. It's like this. Regarding the Song Dynasty, Painter Li Tang's grazing in the autumn woods that you previously registered to bid on. We have just received word that the seller has made a last-minute decision to withdraw the lot." "What?" Su Qing's voice pitched higher. "Withdrawn? Why? I prepared a budget of 80 million for this painting." She had had her eye on grazing in the autumn woods for a long time. It was intended as a birthday gift for her father's 70th birthday. Her father was an avid enthusiast of calligraphy and painting, and he held Li Tang's works in particularly high esteem. She had mentioned this to him long ago, and he had been looking forward to it. Now, with the sudden withdrawal, how was she supposed to explain this to him? "We are terribly sorry, Ms. Su. The seller is our top-tier VIP client. He has the right to withdraw the item at any time before the auction begins. We were also caught off guard." "Who is the seller? Give me his contact information. I'll talk to him personally. I'm willing to pay more." Su Qing said urgently. "I'm very sorry, Ms. Su. According to regulations, we cannot reveal any client information. However," the customer service representative paused. "The seller asked me to pass on a message to you." Su Qing's heart leapt in her throat. "Another message? What did he say?" Her voice was tight. "He said, 'It is merely a forgery. It is not worth President Su wasting her money on it.' That is all." "A forgery?" Su Qing's mind went blank with a buzzing sound. Grazing in the autumn woods had a documented provenance and had been authenticated by multiple top experts. How could it possibly be a forgery? This person not only stopped her from bidding on the painting, but was also insinuating she had no eye for quality. Arrogance. Absolute, utter arrogance. "What? What else did he say?" Su Qing asked, refusing to give up. "That's it." "Oh, right. He also said that if President Su truly likes it, he has several more at home that he could give to you for your amusement." Gift, to speak of gifting an ancient painting worth nearly 100 million. This wasn't just arrogance anymore. This was naked humiliation. Su Qing shook with rage, nearly crushing her phone. It was this feeling again, this sense of powerlessness, of being toyed with in the palm of someone's hand without even knowing who the opponent was. Shi Wei Xian, grazing in the autumn woods. These two events could not be a coincidence. The same person had to be behind them, and other than Lin Zhou, she couldn't think of a second soul. But where was the evidence? The motive? The money? How on earth did he do it? Su Qing's mind was a tangled mess. For the first time, she realized that the man she had shared a bed with for 10 years was shrouded in a mist she had never penetrated. She suddenly remembered the old cowhide document pouch Lin Zhou had taken from the bedside table when he left. At the time, she hadn't paid it any mind. Now that she thought about it, what exactly had been inside? Clinging to the thought like a lifeline, Su Qing immediately rushed out of her office and drove home. She was going to turn that house upside down. She didn't believe that Lin Zhou could take all his secrets with him without leaving a single trace. Su Qing rushed back to the penthouse duplex she once called home, like a madwoman. She stormed into the bedroom, violently yanked open every drawer, and dumped their contents onto the floor. Cosmetics, jewelry, documents, scattered everywhere. She knelt on the ground, searching frantically, trying to find any suspicious clue related to Lin Zhou. Under the bed, on top of the wardrobe, in every corner of the study. She left the entire house in a shambles, yet found nothing. Aside from the luxury items that belonged to her, the traces of Lin Zhou in this house were pitifully few and clean to a terrifying degree. No hidden bank cards, no secret letters, no suspicious diaries. He was like a tenant who had merely stayed there for 10 years. When he left, he took everything that belonged to him, leaving behind not a single tie. Su Qing sat slumped dejectedly on the cold floor, surrounded by the mess. For the first time in this magnificent palace she had built with her own hands, she felt a bone-chilling cold and loneliness. She couldn't figure it out. She really couldn't figure it out. Where exactly did Lin Zhou's money come from? What exactly was the source of his confidence? Just as she was losing all hope, her gaze inadvertently glanced at a corner on the very top shelf of the bookcase. There sat an unremarkable wooden box. It was a gift from a friend for her birthday many years ago. She had disliked its old-fashioned style and had tossed it up there, where it had gathered dust. As if possessed, she fetched a ladder and took the wooden box down. She opened the box. Inside was not some precious item, but a thick stack of old, yellowing photographs. The photos were of Lin Zhou and herself during their university days. Back then, Lin Zhou was far from the gentle, reserved man he is today. He wore a simple white shirt, his eyes bright, radiating high spirits. In the photos, there were moments of him at the National College Student Debate Competition, holding his own against the crowd to win the gold medal. There were images of him in the moot court, his logic so clear it left his opponent speechless, and there was his confident figure delivering a speech with assurance at the opening ceremony as student union president. Su Qing flipped through them one by one, and those memories she had deliberately suppressed came flooding back like a tide. She remembered. The Lin Zhou of over 10 years ago was the most dazzling existence in the entire law school. He was top of his class, overflowing with talent, the favored prodigy in the eyes of countless professors, and the secret crush of countless girls. At that time, even though she was the campus beauty, she seemed somewhat dim in Lin Zhou's radiance. It was she who had pursued him. She admired his talent and was captivated by his confidence. After graduation, Lin Zhou turned down offers from the top domestic Red Circle law firms and founded Longzhou Law Firm with his close friend, Zhao Delong. In just 2 short years, they rose to fame in Jiangchang thanks to several beautifully executed M&A cases. Everyone said Lin Zhou was the future legal tycoon of Jiangxing. But just as his career was at its zenith, her company encountered a fatal crisis. Due to a wrong decision, the capital chain broke, and the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. It was Lin Zhou who resolutely withdrew his shares from the law firm and emptied his savings to help her fill the deficit. Not only that, he used his professional knowledge and connections to help her restructure the company and settle all legal disputes, ultimately allowing her to make a comeback. He, however, went from being a highly anticipated rising star in the legal world to an obscure house husband. At the time, she had been moved, and she had felt guilty. She had told him, Lin Zhou, once the company is back on track, you go back to being a high-powered lawyer. How had he answered? He smiled and said, my talent is to ensure you have no worries behind you. Your success is my greatest success. Since then, he really never mentioned returning to the workplace again. He willingly devoted himself to the kitchen, taking care of her every need with meticulous attention. And she gradually got used to it all, used to his sacrifices, used to his position in the home. Over time, she even forgot what a powerful figure that man, who wore an apron in the kitchen for her, used to be. She began to feel that he was no longer worthy of her, that he couldn't keep up with her pace, that he had become a man who needed to depend on her to survive. Until today, until he left resolutely, until he declared war on her in a way she couldn't understand at all. Su Qing looked at the high-spirited young man in the photo and then thought of the cold, determined man from today. A terrible truth gradually became clear in her mind. Lin Zhou had never changed. It wasn't that he couldn't, it was just that he didn't. It wasn't that he lacked the ability, it was just that he didn't use it. He hadn't lost his light. He had simply given all of it to her, and she had trampled that light under her feet with her own hands. Project Pangu. Su Qing unconsciously muttered these 4 syllables. She remembered. Before Lin Zhou withdrew his shares, he had excitedly mentioned an investment plan called Pangu to her. He said it was the most powerful weapon he was giving her. But later, as he returned to domestic life, the matter was never mentioned again. She had gradually forgotten it, too. Could it be? Su Qing's heart began to beat madly. With trembling hands, she took out her phone and dialed a number she almost never contacted, Zhao Delong. As Lin Zhou's only best friend and former partner, he must know something. The call connected. Hello, President Su. Quite the rare guest. What do you need from me? Zhao Delong's voice carried undisguised sarcasm. Zhao Delong, tell me, what exactly is Project Pangu? Su Qing's voice was shrill and urgent. On the other end, Zhao Delong was silent for a moment, then chuckled softly. President Su, don't you think it's a bit late to ask about this now? However, for the sake of your 10 years of marriage, I can give you a hint. Open your company's stock software right now and look at the share price of Huachuang Technology. With that, Zhao Delong hung up directly. Su Qing hurriedly opened her computer and entered the code for Huachuang Technology. Huachuang Technology was her company's biggest competitor. In just a day, Huachuang Technology's stock price had, without any warning, hit the daily limit up. What horrified her even more was that in the shareholder information column, a newly registered institution named Pangu Capital appeared conspicuously among the top 10 shareholders. Pangu Capital. Su Qing stared fixatedly at those 4 characters on the computer screen, her blood feeling as if it had frozen in an instant. She finally understood. Lin Zhou's counterattack had begun, and the moment he struck, it was with thunderous force, aiming straight for her vital points. Huachuang Technology was her biggest headache. The two companies had highly overlapping businesses and had been fighting tooth and nail to seize market share. Recently, Su Qing's company was negotiating an order worth billions with an important overseas client. This order was significant enough to determine the industry status of both companies for the next 3 years. And Huachuang Technology was also fighting for it at all costs. At this critical juncture, Huachuang Technology's stock price suddenly hit the daily limit up, and behind it appeared the mysterious driving force of Pangu Capital. What did this mean? It meant that Huachuang Technology had secured powerful capital support. They would have ample ammunition to wage this price war and resource war against her. The difficulty of her securing that order had instantly increased exponentially. This was Lin Zhou's true killer move. The acquisition of Shuaixuan, the withdrawal of the ancient painting. Those were just appetizers. He was using this method to destroy her pride bit by bit, dismantle her confidence, and finally deliver a fatal blow. How ruthless! How absolute! Su Qing felt a bone-deep chill. For the first time, she discovered that the business acumen she was so proud of was so fragile in the face of Lin Zhou's meticulously planned layout. She thought she was the chess player, unaware that from the very beginning, she was just a piece on his board. She had lost. She had lost miserably. No, she couldn't just lose like this. The business empire she had spent 10 years of blood and sweat building could not be destroyed overnight. Su Qing took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. She began making frantic phone calls, utilizing all her connections to try and reach Lin Zhou. She called Lin Zhou's parents, but received only a cold refusal. She called Zhao Delong, who had blocked her directly. She even lowered herself to beg Lin Zhou's former classmates and friends whom she had once looked down upon. But everyone seemed to have agreed beforehand to keep their mouths shut tight regarding Lin Zhou's whereabouts. It was as if Lin Zhou had vanished from the face of the earth. He had clearly stirred up a monstrous wave, yet he was hiding behind the scenes, coldly watching her struggle in the surf. Just as Su Qing was overwhelmed, even worse news arrived. Yang Fan, the breeding tool she had selected, was in trouble. Yang Fan's parents, bringing along a large group of relatives, were making a scene downstairs at her company. They held up a banner that read, "Unscrupulous female, Xiao lures college student, intolerable by heaven." They cried out to the passing employees and reporters, recounting how Su Qing had used money to tempt their innocent son into doing something as immoral as surrogacy. Instantly, public opinion was in an uproar. News of the domineering female CEO recruits male college student with heavy gold for a child spread like a virus across the internet. The company's stock price plummeted in response. Su Qing's personal image instantly transformed from a successful female entrepreneur into a woman of loose morals and corrupt character. She was battered and exhausted dealing with the PR crisis, but in her heart, she knew better than anyone. This matter was too coincidental. How did Yang Fan's parents suddenly know the details so clearly? And how did it become so widely known? There had to be someone fanning the flames behind the scenes. And who else could this person be but Lin Zhou? He not only wanted to destroy her career, but also completely ruin her reputation. He wanted her to be betrayed by everyone and left with nothing. At night, Su Qing returned alone to that empty, cold home. She opened the bottle of 82 Lafite that Lin Zhou had prepared for their 10th anniversary and poured it in her mouth, glass after glass. The alcohol numbed her nerves and magnified the regret and fear in her heart. She was wrong. She was truly wrong. She shouldn't have been so arrogant, so self-righteous. She shouldn't have measured everything with money, and she certainly shouldn't have trampled on Lin Zhou's dignity. She wanted to fix this. She wanted to find Lin Zhou and kneel down to beg for his forgiveness. But she didn't even know where he was. Just then, her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. With a trembling hand, she pressed the answer button. Hello. Her voice was incredibly hoarse. From the other end of the line came a voice she thought of day and night, yet feared incomparably. Su Qing, is the game fun? It was Lin Zhou. The moment she heard Lin Zhou's voice, all of Su Qing's disguise and strength instantly collapsed. Lin Zhou, where are you? Will you come back, please? I was wrong. I was truly wrong. She sobbed into the phone, her voice choked with tears. In the past 10 years, she had never shed a single tear in front of outsiders, or even in front of Lin Zhou. She was a queen, and queens do not cry. But now, she was weeping like a helpless child. On the other end of the line, however, Lin Zhou merely let out a soft chuckle, a sound filled with icy mockery. Now you realize you were wrong? It's too late. Su Qing, do you think that your current mess, your company's stock plummeting, your reputation in tatters, is all my doing? Su Qing nodded subconsciously, sobbing. Yes. I know it's all you. Lin Zhou, I beg you, please stop. For the sake of our 10 years as husband and wife. Husband and wife? Lin Zhou cut her off, the sarcasm in his tone intensifying. From the moment you handed me that supplementary agreement on cooperative procreation, we ceased to be husband and wife. As for your current predicament, Lin Zhou paused, his voice taking on a playful edge. You might have misunderstood something. I was the one who pushed Huachuang Technology's stock price. But Yang Fan's parents going to your company to cause a scene? That wasn't my arrangement. Suyin froze. It wasn't you? Then who was it? Do you think an ordinary family would have the guts to challenge you, the wealthiest woman in Jiangxin, to blow things up this big and attract so many reporters? Lin Zhou's words were like a bucket of ice water, instantly sobering Su Qing up. That's right. Yang Fan's parents were just ordinary citizens. How could they understand how to manipulate public opinion? How could they precisely locate the media and create such a huge uproar? There was clearly a professional PR team operating behind the scenes. If it wasn't Lin Zhou, then who? A name instantly jumped into Su Qing's mind. Huachuang Technology. Yes, it must be them. They found out about her agreement with Yang Fan, so they beat her at her own game, fueling the fire from the shadows. Their goal was to ruin her reputation and strike at her company, thereby gaining absolute dominance over that crucial overseas order. What a perfect execution of murder with a borrowed knife. Su Qing felt a chill run through her entire body. She thought she was fighting Lin Zhou, but she hadn't realized that while the mantis stalks the cicada, the oriole is waiting behind. She had become the prey and the laughingstock in everyone's eyes. Figure it out? Lin Zhou's voice sounded again, laced with a hint of mockery. Su Qing, your biggest problem isn't arrogance, it's stupidity. You make too many enemies without realizing it. You think you have everything under control, but you don't know that you're already besieged on all sides. Your downfall today would have happened sooner or later, even without me. Lin Zhou's words were like the sharpest of knives, slicing open all her disguises and forcing her to see her most wretched core. No, it's not like that. Su Qing muttered, as if hypnotizing herself. As long as you come back, as long as you help me, we could be like we were before. We can defeat Huachuan technology. We can. We? Lin Zhou sneered. Su Qing, you still don't get it. You and I have long ceased to be us. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau, bring your household register and ID card. I'm giving you one last chance to end this with dignity. With that, Lin Zhou hung up the phone, giving her no chance to speak again. Su Qing gripped the phone, sitting dazedly on the floor, her tears already dried up. She had lost. She had lost her career, lost her reputation, and completely lost the man who had loved her for 10 years, and whom she had hurt for 10 years. She remembered how Lin Zhou looked 10 years ago when he gave up everything for her. He had smiled and told her, from now on, I am yours. She also remembered how he looked when he left a few days ago. He had said to her calmly, you will soon find out who exactly cannot live without whom. 10 years of full cycle. It turned out that she was the one who had nothing. The next day, Su Qing appeared at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau, looking like a lost soul. She wore exquisite makeup, yet could not hide the haggardness on her face and the despair in her eyes. Lin Zhou was already there waiting. He was wearing a well-tailored casual outfit, standing tall with an indifferent expression. In just a few days, he seemed to have become a different person. That gentle man who always wore a smile was gone. Replacing him was a stranger with sharp eyes and a powerful aura. This was his true self, the real Lin Zhou, whom she had forgotten for 10 years. Did you bring everything? Lin Zhou spoke, his voice void of any emotion. With trembling hands, Su Qing took out her household register and ID card from her bag. Clinging to the last shred of hope, she looked up at him, her voice humbled into the dust. Lin Zhou, is there really no chance left for us? I can give up on having a child. I can give up everything. I just want you back. Lin Zhou looked at her. There was no anger in his eyes, no mockery, not even hatred. There was only a dead silence, an absolute indifference. He took a document out of his briefcase and handed it to her. It wasn't a divorce agreement. It was a trust fund document. The Pangu Trust Fund. Total assets are approximately 37 billion RMB. According to the agreement we made 10 years ago, the ultimate beneficiary is you. Su Qing stared at the document, stared at that astronomical figure, and was completely dumbfounded. 37 billion. She had worked herself to the bone for 10 years, yet her entire company's market value was only 10 billion. And Lin Zhou had just casually handed her wealth amounting to 3 times that. You. Her mind went blank, unable to form a single complete sentence. However, the additional clauses state that if you engage in infidelity during the marriage, I have the right to revoke the agreement. The corner of Lin Zhou's mouth hooked into a cold arc. Your supplementary agreement on cooperative childbearing is the best evidence of that. Right in front of her face, he took out a lighter and ignited the trust document worth 37 billion. The flames rose, swiftly devouring the paper. They also devoured the last shred of Su Qing's hope. Now, can we go inside? Lin Zhou asked indifferently, watching the document turn to ash. The process at the Civil Affairs Bureau was unimaginably fast. When the red stamp of the divorce certificate was pressed down, Su Qing was still in a trance. 10 years of marriage, just like that, was brought to a full stop in a matter of minutes. Walking out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, the sunlight was blinding. Lin Zhou didn't spare her a glance, walking straight across the street. Parked there was a black Bentley Mulsanne. The door opened, and a man in a suit and leather shoes stepped out, respectfully opening the car door for Lin Zhou. It was Zhao Delong. Zhao Delong saw Su Qing across the street, a look of undisguised pleasure and mockery appearing on his face. He mouthed a silent word in her direction. Dumbass. Su Qing's body swayed, nearly unable to stand. Lin Zhou got into the car. From beginning to end, he never looked back at her once. The Bentley silently merged into the traffic flow and quickly vanished from her sight. Just as he had arrived, silently, he left decisively and cleanly, leaving her alone, standing in place like a clown abandoned by the whole world. She gripped the red divorce certificate tightly in her hand. Its color was as piercing as blood. She had lost. She had lost utterly and completely, stripped of everything. She hadn't just lost a man and a 37 billion trust fund. She had lost a love that could have been priceless, a love she had personally buried with 10 years of arrogance and selfishness. The days that followed were hell for Su Qing. Without Lin Zhou, her anchor, the attacks from Pangu Capital became even more unscrupulous. Backed by capital, Huachuang Technology successfully snatched away her most important overseas order. When the news broke, the stock price of Su Qing's company hit the lower limit immediately and remained there for 3 consecutive days with no sign of recovery. The board of directors turned on her, and shareholders dumped their stocks one after another. Banks came knocking to collect debts, and partners demanded to terminate contracts. When a wall is about to fall, everyone give it a push. In just one short week, the business empire she had painstakingly built over 10 years was on the verge of disintegration. And the scandal of her seeking a child for a huge sum completely ruined her reputation. She went from being a much-admired business queen to a rat crossing the street that everyone wanted to beat. She tried to sell off assets to survive. But she discovered in despair that the luxury mansions, cars, and goods she once took pride in were nothing but a drop in the bucket compared to the massive funding gap. She even remembered the $50 million compensation Lin Zhou had given her. Ironically, she had dismissively thrown that card away at home back then. Now, it had likely vanished along with the house that was about to be seized by the court. She finally tasted what it meant to have nothing. That night, she sat alone in her empty office, looking out at the myriad lights of Jiang City, feeling a bone-deep despair for the first time. She took out her phone and scrolled to Lin Zhou's number. She had unblocked that number long ago, yet she never had the courage to dial it. She didn't know what she wanted to say. Beg him? Curse him? Or she just wanted to hear his voice again. Just as she was hesitating, a notification for a financial news story popped up. Headline: Pangu Capital completes controlling acquisition of Huachuang Tech. Mysterious chairman Mr. Lin makes first public debut. Su Qing's fingers froze as she clicked on the news article. The accompanying image was a photo taken at the press conference. Under the spotlights, Lin Zhou stood in the center of the stage, clad in a crisp black suit. Flanking him were the senior executives of both Huachuang Tech and Pangu Capital. They surrounded him like stars clustering around the moon. He wore a faint smile, his gaze confident and composed. It was the way he looked in her memories from 10 years ago. No, he was even more dazzling, more radiant than he had been back then. Beneath the photo was an excerpt from a reporter's interview with him. The reporter asked, "Mr. Lin, you withdrew from the public eye for 10 years at the peak of your career. Now that you have returned with such dominance, may I ask what you have been doing for the past decade?" Su Qing stared fixedly at the screen, waiting for his answer. How she hoped he would mention her, if only a single word, even if it was out of hatred. However, Lin Zhou simply smiled at the camera and said something that caught everyone off guard. "For the past 10 years, I was learning to cook." The audience was in an uproar. But in front of the screen, Su Qing completely broke down in that instant. She buried her face in her hands and let out a gut-wrenching wail. Learning to cook. Those words were more devastating than any accusation or abuse could ever be. He was using this nonchalant manner to tell the world, and to tell her, that those 10 years, the years she had taken such pride in, the years he had silently devoted himself to, were, in his eyes, nothing more than an exercise in cooking. And she didn't even qualify to be considered his opponent.